So you raise an interesting point. You mentioned this term several times in the discussion about the impedance of the device and controlling the impedance. Well, to the average viewer out there who may not be familiar with what you're describing, and in fact, as it is, even in my lectures up to this point, we haven't really touched on impedance, but we've just graced it, haven't explained it. Can you explain to the viewer what impedance is, how it relates to the guitar and the guitar pedal, and what is it? Like, how does it affect our world in the midst of recording and making music?
Sure. I can use a really simple analogy, which would be a water faucet. So you know that when you have a water service coming in from your street, from your local utility, that water is at the ready for you. That's potential, which our analogy would be the water pressure would be voltage. It's waiting for you there. When you turn it on, it comes out, and as you open the spout, more water comes out. But at a certain point in time, no more water can come out of the faucet in your house. If it's full blast, that's all that's coming out, because your pipe, the size of your pipes, is the impedance, what is impeding the flow of that water. So if you went to your street and you tried to fill up a glass of water with your fire hydrant, if you were able to open it, obviously water would go everywhere. It's
a mess.
Yeah, you would drop the cup and you'd be wet.
Yeah.
Totally stupid. So what happens from the fire hydrant to your house is the water pipes gradually get stepped down so they can interface with your sink. That is what impedance is for electronics. Now, how does that work, and what changes? What happens is a passive guitar pickup is anywhere from about 4,500 ohms to, for like a Dan Electro lipstick, very light, up to sometimes 20,000 ohms for a ceramic, like a really overwound pickup that you would use for metal if you wanted a really tight sound.
Yeah.
The kind of sweet vintagey ones are anywhere from about 6,000 to 8,000, depending. So what that means is, if I have a guitar pedal, it's looking to see a guitar pickup plugged into it, right? Which, let's just say, for a round number, is 6,000 ohms. If you try to plug, say, a console into a guitar pedal, first of all, you're giving it way too much energy, and using our analogy, it would be more like the fire hydrant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you would have to turn the output of that channel on the console so low that you would be introducing noise into the signal.
Yeah, it's not practical, which is why we can't interface pedals on the inserts on an Eve, because it doesn't work.
It's just not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
It wants to see balanced gear, which is what all this beautiful equipment is. The same thing with a any DAW, any type of converter, doesn't matter. It's brand agnostic, doesn't matter. It wants to see a balanced piece of gear.
Yeah.
Coming back to it. And if it doesn't, you have a huge issue with signal to noise. And at a certain point in time, if you make a mistake and your channel's cranked up, you will blow up your pedal. Because you're sending a ton of energy into something that is
just not ready for it.
The guitar pickup is very weak, you know? So when designing and when using a product that's made for guitar, like even say like a mic pre that we all have that has a 1/4 inch input.
Yeah.
A high Z input.
Yeah.
Right? That wants to see a bass or a guitar or whatever you want to see, and then that brings it back up into balance mode. What my product, PEDALpUNK, does is it alleviates the multiple pieces of gear that you need to insert a pedal onto a send and return of Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton, whatever.
So in other words, I would be able to take this device that is on my credenza here, plug it into the insert of my Neve on a channel, and drop in any guitar pedal that I would normally use on the pedal board.
Correct.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's.
In fact, I don't think I know any device that will do that. Even though I don't think you can. I don't even know if I could do that with the reamp device, which I think is kind of.
You could do half of it, which the PEDALpUNK is a reamp. Half of it is, but it's also got a preamp on the back end of it.
Okay, so it's the full round trip.
Right, for the same price. So
wow.
You know, a good reamp is about $250, and that's what these sell for. So it's got the whole thing. Plus, you have a saturation circuit, you have an overdrive circuit, and then you have the focus,
which is a variable impedance.
Just the impedance, yeah.
So with this variable impedance, getting back to the whole impedance discussion, okay, we understand that it has to do with the resistance and, you know, taking a very large pipeline and slowly shrinking it down to something that's more manageable for the end user's device.
And then boosting it back up.
And then boosting it back up again. So in any situation where you're dealing with that, there's trade-offs, I'm assuming.
Sure.
Usually noise and heat happen to be one of the byproducts. But with this focus knob, in your case, it sounds like it's at the very least, if it's not inducing or introducing harmonic distortion, something along the way is doing that.
Absolutely.
What exactly is the focus knob doing on an electronic level that would cause this harmonic distortion?
Well, it's adding impedance, which means it's blocking the signal more. And what happens sonically, what we hear, depending on what type of gear is connected to it, is it's as though you have a passive EQ shift. So if you had something that was overly bright, or like a presence control on an amplifier that was cranked, and you wanted to turn that down to get a thicker, darker sound, it can aid you in that way.
That's pretty cool.
And one function of it is I will use them. I have 4 set up in my mix rig in my studio. And oftentimes when people send me records to mix, if they've used software synthesizers, which is almost all I get these days, unless it's a synth act who has a lot of hardware. What the problem with them mostly, getting them to play nice within a mix, within a track, play nice with all the other instruments, is everything that's done in the box, even though they're powerful, they sound amazing. There's no air, there's no distortion, and it's very blocky. It's like, okay, if we have this much room in our panorama of the mix, the spread of the synths, it just kind of sits. It doesn't, even if you use a modulation or a pan, it doesn't go back and forward. Whereas what I've done, again, figured out completely on accident, is I will plug just a cable from the send to the return, and then overdrive that software synth with PEDALpUNK, and it adds saturation and depth to it. And all of a sudden, just as you know, with analog tape, you have to work a lot less hard to get it to actually mix with cymbals, vocals. And that was what took so long to actually get it to come out, because I didn't want to make just a box that was just a bridge. I wanted it to have attitude. It has a lot of attitude. If you plug it into itself and you crank it up, it will start spitting and it'll go nuts, you know. Well,
then I would say without further ado, we should actually demo this thing and see what it's all about. So this will be, I guess, wrapping up this episode, or in this case, I would say this part of our interview. We're going to kind of take a few minutes to regroup and set this pedal up, this guy right here, so we can actually see what it does in the trenches under fire. So thank you guys for watching. As always, please subscribe and leave any comments that you have, or ask questions for either myself or Scott below. Thank you again, and have a great day.